come up here and turn my mic back on every time.
The record should reflect the jury is active in the courtroom, defendant present in court with marking what is your
I'm sorry.
homework. It reads, and if you would rather look at it, I'll be glad to show you. This is piece of denture from floorboard, upper or lower, via picture shows, and was rest of denture that this piece came from still in place in victim's mouth. Everybody satisfied?
We're satisfied, Your Honor.
Anything further to correct the statement?
No, Your Honor.
Anything further to correct the statement?
No, Your Honor.
You mean, why don't you in, please?
It's something. No. Get questions. Yes. Let me try it.
Yeah, might as well. I guess. Your Honor, we are about to use this. We have a few more minutes, and then we need to use this one last time. Would you like us to go ahead and move it now, or
Sure, that's fine.
turn?
Witness statement.
Agent Louder, I believe when we broke just before lunch, you were talking about having gone to the house on Schoolhouse Road, correct?
It was Schoolhouse Street, yes, ma'am.
Okay, Schoolhouse Street. And you talked about the fact that the Wake County Sheriff's Office had found some evidence there that you collected. Could you go back and review that with us, please?
Yes, the Sheriff's Department had found during their search of the house, I believe, a MagTech box of ammunition, as well as a Taurus handgun box located in the master bedroom closet.
Your Honor, if I may approach.
Yes, ma'am.
Agent Louder, starting with what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 28, can you identify that for the court, please?
It's a box of MagTech 380 caliber cartridges, 45 out of 50, head stamped CBC 380.
And if you would please open that.
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's a MagTech box of ammunition.
Okay, and is that ammunition that which you collected from the address on Schoolhouse Street?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and is it in substantially the same condition as that which you collected?
It is. You can tell that there has been fingerprint powder as well as super glue on it.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, we would ask that the MagTech ammunition box be admitted into evidence, states exhibit number 28.
Object. No objection.
Agent Louder, if you would please, tell us what kind of ammunition that is.
It's caliber .380.
Okay, and what, how else would you describe it? What make is it, or who's the manufacturer on it, if you can tell?
The box states that it's a MagTech technologically advanced. It's a centerfire cartridge rounds, and the ammunition is just golden color, and the head stamp, which is the bottom, says CBC 380 Auto.
And how many rounds were there in the box?
There were 45 rounds in the box.
And the box is a box of how many?
It holds 50.
You mentioned, and we've heard prior testimony about a projectile that was located in the Jeep. Were you able to determine whether there was a head stamp on that projectile?
There won't be a head stamp on a projectile. If you're looking at this this piece of ammunition, the part that I collected from the car, if you can tell, is the top portion. When the gun is fired, this is the power from the gun causes the gunpowder to ignite within this shell casing, which causes the projectile to be expelled forward through the gun, and the shell casing is kicked out of the gun if it's a automatic.
Having observed and photographed and measured and otherwise processed the projectile that was in the vehicle, is it similar to that ammunition there?
It's similar in color.
And can you tell anything else about its similarity? And if not, why wouldn't you be able to at this point?
No, I'm not a ballistic expert.
Okay, thank you. Tell us what, if anything, you did in processing the MagTech ammunition box.
This ammunition box was processed for fingerprint evidence. Again, like I've said before, it was processed using the super glue chamber. So the box, along with the ammunition as well as the case, was all placed in there. And the shell casings were removed from this case so I could fingerprint all of the shell casings. After it was super glued, it was processed with black magnetic powder. Again, using that black powder to paint on, or using a brush to paint it on to those surfaces, and fingerprints were developed on the box.
And once you developed those fingerprints, what did you do with those?
Once I developed the fingerprints on the box, I collected those fingerprints again using the clear tape and placing the tape on the box to smooth over the fingerprint so the print adhered to the tape, and then place it on the card, on the note card, where I then drew a picture of where I got it from as well as my markings.
In terms of any comparison or any analysis of that ammunition in comparison to the projectile that was found in the vehicle, does the SBI, are they the ones responsible for doing firearms
Yes, ma'am.
testing and gun testing? And do they typically do that kind of analysis or testing where a firearm has not been located?
No, they don't.
Okay. In going to the crime scene in this case and processing the vehicle and participating in a search of the house, was a firearm ever located in this case?
No, it wasn't.
Okay. If I could turn your attention to what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 89. I'm sorry, State's Exhibit number 29.
This is item number 89 for me, that I marked item number 89. It's a Taurus 380 handgun box.
And for our purposes, purpose, it has been marked as State's Exhibit number 29, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and how can you identify it?
It has my markings on the exterior of the package, the CCBI case number, Wake County case number, Jose Perez as the victim, the address of 12412 Schoolhouse Street where I collected it from, my name, the investigator's name, as well as Wake County.
And go ahead, if you would, and open that envelope, that bag. Recognize the contents there.
Yes, I do.
And is that the Perez handgun box that you collected from the Schoolhouse Street address on June 25th?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it in substantially the same condition as on the day that you collected it?
Not on the day I collected it. It again has the fingerprint powder as well as super glue on it.
Okay, we'll discuss that in a moment. Your Honor, we would ask that State's Exhibit number 29 be admitted into evidence.
Objection. No objection, Your Honor. Motion granted.
So talk to us about, it sounds like you processed it for fingerprints as well.
I did. It was very similar in the way that I processed the ammunition box. It was again placed in the super glue chamber. Inside the box there was also a plastic bag that was processed with the box. They were placed in the super glue chamber. Black magnetic was applied to the box as well as the plastic bag. And any fingerprints that I developed I then collected.
And did you in fact, were you able to collect some latent prints or fingerprints? And what happened to those?
They were then put in a latent evidence envelope form, sealed, and placed in the latent locker for a latent examiner to later examine.
You indicated that within the box there was a plastic bag. Was there anything else in the box?
Yes, there was a receipt, various parts to the firearm, and as well as an instruction manual, the plastic bag, more paperwork from the firearm, and just, I guess, packaging from the firearm as well.
There's no weapon within the,
No, ma'am.
let me approach. We are marking the receipt as Exhibit 29A. I'm going to show it to the defense. If you would, please, for the court, identify what's been marked as Exhibit 29A.
It is a receipt from T&K Outdoors, located at 120 John Dodd Road, Spartanburg, South Carolina. The item on the receipt is, it says TAU 380 IB Mini RE, quantity of 1. The price was $3.99 with 99 cents.
And is there a date on that?
Yes, there is. It's 9/19/2012 at 2:46 p.m.
Thank you. If you would, Your Honor, permission to publish the box, it states Exhibit number 29 to the jury.
No objection. Motion granted.
Agent Lara, if you just want to hold up the box for purposes. If you could please identify for the court what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 69.
It's what I've marked as item number 94. It's a Layton envelope that contains Layton cards 25 through 35. And again, it has the CCBI case number, Wake County case number. Jose Perez is the victim. The offense is a homicide, and the address, my initials, and then I've also sealed it.
And if you would please go ahead and open that. And you recognize those contents of that envelope to be that which you just read appears on the label of the outside of the envelope.
Yes, I do.
Those would be the latent lifts that you took from the ammunition box and the gun box.
Yes, that's correct.
And how many in total are there? You are, if I may approach.
Definitely.
There are 11 in total.
Okay. Your Honor, the state has marked these as 69A through L. Are they in substantially the same condition as when you took them and created those lift cards?
They are, with the exception of the Layton examiner's notes again on the front of them.
Okay. And we've talked about the process of those being submitted to the Layton examiner, and we'll be hearing from the Layton examiner later on in the trial. Thank you. I would ask that State's Exhibit number 69 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor.
And Your Honor, that would include 69A through J. L. Thank you.
Well,
Now, we would also ask that State's Exhibit number 29A be admitted into evidence at this time, that being the receipt.
any objection? No objection, Your Honor. Motion allowed.
Agent Louder, was there any other evidence that you processed that was collected either at the house or at the scene off Old Buffalo Road, Old Bailiff Road, that we talked about this morning?
Also on June 25th, there were 2 pairs of shoes that were collected. I examined those shoes for possible blood evidence. The shoes were broken. The first pair of shoes was a safe step black in color shoe, size 10. Both the right and the left were collected. Both of those shoes, it didn't appear that there was any blood, but just in case there was some without that I couldn't see without some other source, I swabbed the exterior, the interior, and the sole of the shoe. And I tested those 3 swabs with phenolphthalein. Again, that's just a presumptive test for blood. All 3 of those swabs came back negative on the safety step shoe. The second pair of shoes was a tread safe black in color shoe. Both the left and the right, they were size medium-10, W-11-11. 5-W. Again, those shoes, it didn't appear that there was any blood on them, but I swabbed the interior, exterior, and soles of the shoe. All three of those areas were tested with phenolphthalein, and there was no reaction.
Were y'all ever able to make any determination as to what had caused that?
Not to my knowledge. I don't do the identification on the fabric pattern or the unknown impression.
At some point during your involvement in this case, were you asked to come and assist in serving a search warrant on the defendant in this case, Ms. Joanna Madonna?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell us about that, please?
On Monday, June 17th of 2013, I was requested to respond to 3301 Hammond Road, which is also the county jail is also part of our building, to meet with Sergeant Battle of the Wake County Sheriff's Department. She advised that she had a search warrant for Joanna Madonna to collect a suspect kit or a subject kit, as well as photograph her, also to do 10 prints off of her.
What is a subject kit, Agent Lauber?
Subject kit is a prepackaged kit that we have, and inside the kit it contains various other envelopes of items that we would collect for DNA purposes. They include a blood swab or a blood card, a buccal swab, which is just a sterile swab, and then the cheek is swabbed for possible DNA. We also collect pubic hair as well as head hair, and there was also an envelope in there for pubic hair scrapings.
And in addition, once you collect a subject kit such as this, talk to us a little bit about what is done with the kit.
The kit is just held on to for further analysis, for DNA analysis.
And in terms of maintaining the integrity of the DNA, how is that stored?
Like I've stated before, anything we collect for DNA is always stored in something paper so it doesn't degrade over the time or become moldy or lose its value. So all of the items that I explained are contained within a paper envelope. Every single item is sealed by itself, and it's initialed by either me or the nurse, depending who took it. It's then placed back in that kit where the entire kit is sealed shut and then placed in a secure evidence locker.
And in this case, who actually was responsible for collecting the DNA samples that you've mentioned?
I collected all of the DNA samples with the exception of the blood. A nurse at the jail took a blood swab.
And were you present when that occurred
Yes, I was.
and observed? You mentioned a few minutes ago that you also were asked to take 10 prints. What does that mean? We talked about it a little earlier today, but...
I was just like I had talked about before about how I took a fingerprints of the deceased. I was requested to take those of Joanna Madonna too.
And did you take them, and if not, why not?
No, I didn't. I didn't take them because it's against our policy to take fingerprints of someone who has already been entered into the jail.
Did you, on that date, take photographs of the defendant, Ms. Madonna?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and Your Honor, if I can approach,
Yes.
what is the purpose of taking those photographs?
Just to document her the way she was when she was in jail, if there were any markings on her body or anything that we needed to put into evidence.
would please identify the form that's been marked as state exhibit number 2.
They're the photographs I took of Joanna Madonna.
Do they accurately reflect Miss Madonna as you saw her on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Have they been altered or deleted in any way?
No.
Okay, and would they help you illustrate, or would they help illustrate your testimony as to what you saw on June 17th, 2013?
Yes, ma'am.
No, we would ask that these pictures be admitted into evidence states exhibit number 4.
Ms. Lau.
We would ask for permission to publish these to the jury, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Do you know how many photographs you took in total?
Approximately, I would say, between 45 and 60.
Okay, and having looked at the photographs there in front of you, are there any photographs that you took that are not represented in what we have provided to you today?
No.
Looking first at what's been marked as photograph number 90, and then states exhibit number 4. If you would just describe what that is.
It's just an overall photograph of Mrs. Madonna.
Okay. And photograph number 91.
It's the same.
Okay. And is there a reason why you took 2 of the same, or why there are 2 pictures?
In some of the photographs, it's due to flash issues or trying to get a better photograph. Also, there are duplicates because my camera was in RAW. I had been processing evidence in the lab and was photographing evidence underneath an alternate light source. So when I photograph it like that, I leave the camera in RAW, which is a way for our latent examiners to compare fingerprints to. And when it's in RAW, it also generates what we call a JPEG photo, which is just a normal photo. So that's why I see duplicates of some of the photos.
Again, this would include all of the photos that you took of her.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I know we've mentioned this, but this was June 17th, and what time exactly on June 17th?
I met with Sergeant Battle at 10:20 in the morning.
Okay. And it was shortly thereafter that y'all began this process?
I would say within 30 to 45 minutes.
And was that roughly 24 hours after you had been called out to the crime scene?
It was a little over 24 hours.
Looking at photograph number 92 within states exhibit number 4, identify if you would.
It's just a close-up of Miss Madonna's face.
Okay. And looking at photograph number 93.
It's the same as the one before it.
Okay. What, if any, thing did you notice about her face?
On her right cheek, there was a very small red mark.
Okay. Any other observations of any injuries or anything else as to her face?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And looking at what's been marked as photograph number 94.
That's just a close-up photograph of the small red mark I saw on her cheek.
And if you could step down and show when you speak to the red mark what you're referring to.
It's just right here on her cheek.
And looking at photograph number 95, is that a duplicate
Yes.
picture? Moving on to what's been marked as photograph number 96 within State's Exhibit number 4. Identify for us, if you would, what that is.
It's a close-up photograph of her chest. There were small red markings on her chest.
And describe for us, if you would, what those red markings were or how they appeared.
They appeared to be just 2 small red lines that went down on her chest. Very shallow.
Any indication the skin was broken at that point, or any indication of bleeding?
There didn't appear to be any bleeding, and there was no dry blood.
And photograph number 97,
It's the same photograph that you just saw.
and looking at, and when you say same, and it's the same shot, maybe a different,
Yes, one is the RAW that you're seeing, and one is the JPEG photo.
okay.
But it's the exact same photo, just different formats.
And identifying what's been marked as photo 98 within State's Exhibit number 4.
98 is just a close-up photograph of those markings on her chest.
Were there any other markings or any other that you noticed other than those?
There were, I believe, they were on her left arm.
Okay, but I'm sorry, in relation to her chest, or,
No, ma'am, not on her chest.
okay. And I believe in photograph number 97, that includes her neck as well. Were there any injuries that you photographed in regards to that?
No, I did not see anything on her neck.
And looking at what's been marked as photograph 99 within State's Exhibit 4, again a duplicate of photograph 98.
Yes, ma'am.
And you mentioned a moment ago, some markings or scratches on her arm. Are these the scratches you're referring to?
Yes, they are.
Okay, and if you could just describe for us.
Again, just like her chest, they were very shallow red marks on her upper arm, her lower arm, and I believe on the inside of her left arm as well.
And I believe this is photo number 100 within State's Exhibit number 4, and number 101 being, again, maybe a different film type or the same photograph.
Yes, ma'am.
Looking at what's been marked, let's go back for just a minute to State's Exhibit number 4, photograph number 100. Again, in this, there appears to be another angle of the defendant's neck. Again, did you notice or photograph any injuries related to her neck?
I did not see anything on her neck either.
And looking at what's been marked as photograph number 102 within State's Exhibit 4.
That's just a close-up photograph of the markings on the top part of her left arm.
And is that true as well for what's been marked as photograph 103 within State's Exhibit 4?
Yes, ma'am.
And then photograph 104 within State's Exhibit 4?
104 is a close-up of the lower portion of her arm.
And is that true as well of State's Exhibit 4, number 105?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were there any other injuries to that arm that you observed?
Not that I noticed.
In order to take these photographs at these angles, and how far a distance are you standing from the defendant?
At the most 2 feet.
And tell us a little bit about where this occurs, the room, what kind of lighting there is.
It's in the jail, and it's in a secured room with, I believe, a deputy, or Sergeant Battle was in there with me, as well as a nurse. And it's just a room that they use for hospital type or health type issues, I guess.
And looking at what's been marked as photograph 106 within State's Exhibit number 4, what is that?
That's a close-up photograph of her left arm. I'm sorry, her right arm.
And is that true also of photograph 107?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What, if any, markings did you notice or observe on that arm?
I didn't see anything on that arm.
And looking at what's been marked as photograph number 108 within State's Exhibit number 4, what is that a photograph of?
The bottom portion of her right arm.
And again, were there any markings or anything that you noticed or observed about that portion of her arm?
There weren't any markings, but it appeared that there was a very, very light bruise near her elbow.
Okay, and if you could, just for the jury, point out.
Right here.
And what was the tone of that bruise?
It was very light, so almost a yellow consistency.
Does that tell you anything about it?
Not particularly that it wasn't a very old bruise, super old.
Looking at what's been marked as photograph 109, State's Exhibit 4, is that the same as 108?
Yes, it is.
Looking at what's been marked as number 110 within State's Exhibit number 4, can you identify what that is for us, please?
They're photographs of the top of her hands.
I noticed there that there is a Bandaid on the defendant's hand. Do you know what that was related to?
The Band-Aid was placed on her hand, I believe, by a nurse after she took the blood for the blood card.
And was that when you were in there?
Yes, it was.
And so is that process of taking the blood card, why don't you explain just a little bit what that process is?
I believe she just pricks the tip of the finger, and then she puts it on almost like like a piece of gauze that is then secured for further DNA analysis.
Almost like having your iron taken or
Yes.
having your finger pricked for an iron. Okay. Looking at what's been marked as photograph number 111 in State's Exhibit number 4, is that likewise a photograph of her hands?
Yes, ma'am.
And photograph 112 within State's Exhibit number 4.
It's another photograph of her hands.
Other than the Band-Aid that was placed there by the nurse after they took the blood card, what, if any, other markings did you observe on the defendant's hands?
On the top of the hands, I didn't see anything else.
And looking at what's been marked as photograph number 113 in State's Exhibit number 4, is that similarly a picture of the top of her hands?
Yes, ma'am.
And looking at what's been marked as photograph number 114 within State's Exhibit number 4, describe what that is.
It's the palms of both of her hands.
What, if any, markings did you notice on the palms of her hands?
On the palms, I didn't see anything, but on the right middle finger, there is a small mark.
Okay. Looking at photograph number 115, is that a similar photograph of her palms of her hands?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And likewise, if you could identify what's been marked as photograph As to the mark that you recognized on the hand, did you photograph that?
I did.
Okay, and we'll get to that in a few minutes, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Looking at what's been marked as photograph 116 in State's Exhibit number 4, what is that a picture of?
It's a photograph of the interior of her left arm.
And could you tell anything about the marking there?
Here again, just as another small red mark on the interior portion of her arm.
And is that photograph 117 of State Exhibits number 4, a duplicate or similar photograph as to that same area of her body?
Yes, ma'am.
And going back now to photograph 118 in State's Exhibit number 4, is that, what is that?
I asked her to remove the Band-Aid from her finger so I could photograph the top of her hands one more time.
Okay. And is that similar in photograph 119?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's my understanding you indicated you noticed no markings on the backs of her hands. Is that?
That's correct.
Looking at photograph number 120 within State's Exhibit number 4.
It's a photograph of her right hand palm up and a close-up of her fingers. The finger closest to her thumb is what had the Band-Aid on it in a previous picture, and the small marking on her middle finger is the other marking that I had noted.
Okay, and so the finger where you saw the nurse take the blood card, could you just point that out for purposes of the jury?
It's this finger right here.
And looking at what's been marked as photograph 121 within State's Exhibit 4, is that the same?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What, if anything, were you able to determine about the marking there on her middle finger?
It again was just a small, shallow marking on her finger.
And is photograph number 122 in State's Exhibit 4 another picture of that?
Yes, ma'am.
I think we've talked about this, but you've taken a lot of pictures. What's the purpose of taking all of these pictures? Why do you take multiple pictures of the same thing?
A lot of times I do it for flash reasons, but I also want to make sure that I have the best photograph that I have. It might not look spectacular on my small little camera screen, and when I get it back to the lab, another picture might look better than another one. So I want to make sure I have the best photo that I can have. That's why I typically take multiple photographs.
So part of your goal as a crime scene investigator who's documenting things through photography is to get the most accurate and detailed shots you can. Is that a fair?
Absolutely.
Okay. Looking at what's been marked as photograph number 123 in State's Exhibit number 4.
It's another photograph of the hand.
Again, turning now to what's been marked as photograph 124 in State's Exhibit number 24. What is this a photograph of?
It's an overall photograph of her legs.
What, if any, markings can be seen on this photograph?
None on the front of her legs.
Okay. And looking at what's been marked as photograph 125 in State's Exhibit 4. Again, an overall photograph of her legs.
Yes, ma'am.
Photograph 126 in State's Exhibit number 4. What is this a picture of?
It's the side of her left leg, and it appears that there's a darker bruise on her leg.
Okay. Describe for us, if you will, what the size of that bruise.
I would say it was maybe about that big. Wasn't a very large bruise.
Okay. Anything else on the side of her leg there that you noticed or observed?
It was the only thing that I noticed.
Anything about the age of the bruise you're able to make a determination of?
There was yellowing on the outside of the bruise, and the interior portion of it was darker.
Okay. Looking at what's been marked as State's Exhibit 127, is that a similar photograph?
Yes, ma'am.
And turning to what's been marked as photograph 128 within State's Exhibit number 4, what is that a picture of?
Just a close-up of her right leg. The
And
top
what, if
portion.
any, markings did you notice on that?
I didn't notice any.
There appears to be up kind of on the right-hand side of the leg, a darker color or shading of some sort. Can you look at that and tell us what that is?
It's a shadow from her top.
And how can you make that determination?
Based off of the way that the shirt's laying and how the light was on her that day.
And when you took this photo, were you about 2 feet away as well?
I was probably closer than that at the time.
Okay. Did you notice any other markings on that leg?
No.
Or any markings on that leg, I guess it's appropriate at that angle? Okay.
No.
What's been marked as number 130, photograph 130 within States Exhibit number 4? Is that just a duplicate? I'm sorry, 130 is, what is 130?
130 is her, her right leg.
Okay. What, if anything, did you notice about that leg?
There weren't any markings on that leg that I noted.
And looking at what's been marked as States Exhibit 131.
Same photo.
Thank you. Looking at what's been marked as States Exhibit 132, I'm sorry, photograph 132 and States Exhibit number 4.
It's just another overall photograph of the front of her legs.
And is that likewise true of what's been marked as photograph 133 within States Exhibit 4?
Yes, ma'am.
What's been marked as photograph number 134 within States Exhibit 4?
It's a close-up photograph of her knees.
And what, if any, markings did you notice?
There weren't any that I noticed on her knees.
Okay. And is that photograph number 135 within States Exhibit number 4 similarly a picture of her knees?
Yes, ma'am.
And looking at what's been marked as photograph 136 within States Exhibit number 4.
It's an overall photograph of both of the tops of her feet.
What, if any, markings did you notice on her feet?
There were no markings that I noted on her feet.
And looking at what's been marked as States Exhibit number 4, photograph 137.
Again, just an overall photograph of her feet.
And those photographs appear a little bit darker than some of the others. What is that a result of?
The flash just wasn't angled correctly.
And so would 138 have corrected that?
I manipulated the flash, yes.
Okay. And so 138 is a photograph then of the defendant's feet.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And photograph 139 is part of States Exhibit number 4. Again, a photograph of the defendant's feet.
Yes, ma'am.
Any markings?
No, ma'am.
Photograph number 140,
It's a photograph of her right foot.
and that's within States Exhibit number 4. And then photograph 141 being similarly a photograph of her right foot.
Yes, ma'am.
And photograph 142 within States Exhibit number 4.
It'd be her left foot.
And photograph 143 within States Exhibit number 4.
Her left foot.
Turning now to what's been marked as photograph number 144 within States Exhibit number 4. What is that a picture of?
An overall photograph of her back.
What, if any, markings did you notice on her back?
I didn't notice any.
And photograph number 145 of States Exhibit number 4.
An overall photograph of her back as well.
Were there any other pictures that were taken of Miss Madonna?
No, ma'am.
Was there, at any time, did Miss Madonna ask you to take photographs of anything particular?
She did. She pointed out the bruise on her leg, as well as some of the markings on her arms.
Did she ask or point out any other injuries?
The small marking on her finger, she also pointed that out as well.
Were there any injuries that she pointed out or asked you to document that you failed to document?
No, ma'am.
You can take your seat, Agent Lawler. Thank you very much. If I may approach the witness, Your Honor.
Yes.
What's been marked is State's Exhibit number 15.
I believe it's the suspect kit. It was repackaged by the sheriff's department. I typically just left it in the box. They put it in an envelope.
And if you'll just go ahead and open that envelope.
Yes. It's the subject kit from Joanna Madonna.
Okay, and how do you recognize it to be that?
The label that I placed on the front of it indicates exactly what it is. Again, my case number, the date that I took it, the victim's name, as well as my name and the investigator's name. I've also sealed it shut.
Does it appear to be in the same condition as when you participated in the collection of the suspect kit?
Yes, there's just another initial on it as to when it's been opened.
Your Honor, we would ask at this time that State's Exhibit number 15 be admitted into evidence.
We object to the subject matter. What's the matter?
Agent Ladder, at some point, was there additional clothing of Miss Madonna that you had occasion to process?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you just tell us how that came about and what that was?
I believe Investigator Barefoot from the Wake County Sheriff's Department brought it to me at the CCBI facilities. I believe it was Miss Madonna's clothing that she was booked into jail, the clothing she was wearing when she was booked into jail.
Okay. If you would please identify what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 33.
It is a swab of suspected blood from a pair of white and color shorts labeled Faded Glory, brand size 12.
And where did this swab, first of all, how can you recognize it?
Again, it has my markings on the front of it, my label, my case number, county case number, as well as the victim's name, the date, and the address in my
Where
markings.
would it have come from?
When Barefoot gave me the clothing, there were various pieces of clothing that he gave me. One item in particular was the pair of shorts that I just described, and I believe it was suspected blood on the front of the shorts.
If you would open that envelope. Did you test that suspected blood?
Yes, ma'am.
And you told us about a number of different agents you used to do that, but what test did you use in this situation?
I used phenolphthalein for this. Again, that's the 3-part test. So the area was swabbed, and then it was tested with the 3 chemicals, and an immediate reaction occurred. So then this swab was collected from the shorts.
And that immediate reaction being kind of a hot pink, I think you talked
Yes.
about, or pink color, and then a separate swab was used to actually collect.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do you recognize the contents of that?
Yes, it's the swab I collected.
Okay, and is it substantially in the same condition as when you collected it?
Yes, ma'am.
The state would ask that state's exhibit number 33 be admitted into evidence.
Mr. Lau.
Agent Louder, as part of this investigation, at some point, was it determined that certain items should be submitted to the state crime lab for DNA testing?
Yes, ma'am.
And when was that done, to your knowledge? And we talked about earlier on, but there's been a lot of information today. The state crime lab, in terms of submitting items there, what kind of testing were you looking to submit items for as part of this investigation?
At CCBI, we can do latent evidence. So typically all latent evidence will stay in-house or within the CCBI facilities because we have latent examiners who can do that. Typically the evidence that we will submit to the SBI are things that we don't do, such as examining firearms, ballistics, DNA, trace evidence, items of those nature.
And what items or were items submitted to the state crime lab?
Yes, ma'am, there were several items that I submitted to the state crime lab.
And in a case like this, are there items that you might not have submitted to the state crime lab?
Yes, typically the state crime lab has a limit on a specific number of items that I can send them. So I look for pieces of evidence that are going to have the most evidentiary value.
And that is determined how?
Based upon the evidence that I've collected as well as talking to investigators.
Thank you. Your Honor, if I could have one moment. Did you ask that all of the different swabs that you had been taken be submitted to the crime lab?
No, not all of the swabs were submitted.
And why would you do that?
Because I collected a large amount of possible blood swabs. So I sent various swabs from the car, various pieces of clothing to the SBI.
Thank you. We have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Agent Louder.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Sounds like you put a lot of work into this case, and I appreciate your time. I will try not to make my questions proportional to the amount of work that you put in.
Thank you.
But I have a few questions for you. One of the first things you started talking about when you came up is you coming upon Mr. Perez's body. And you said that you usually anticipate more liver mortis, which will be pooling of the blood around his abdomen, correct?
Typically you find more liver mortis, meaning on this particular case there was a very small amount that I found. Since the deceased was found face down, you would expect to see more liver mortis on the chest.
Because gravity.
Absolutely.
And blood pooling towards the ground, and you would expect to see more there.
Yes.
And in this case, because of the nature of his wound, he obviously lost a lot of blood.
I believe it was due to the...
And that was obviously, well, I guess you don't know exactly, but that would be your, I guess, professional opinion on that.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, ma'am.
May we approach Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am. Recess at this point. During the time that you're not with us, that you do not talk among yourselves about this case. Do not talk to the parties, the witnesses, or the lawyers about anything at all. Further, do not talk to anyone else, allow anyone else to talk with you, to say anything in your presence about this case. Stay away from your smartphones and have anything whatsoever to do with this trial, and do not form any opinion about an issue in this trial. While everyone else will remain seated, I'll excuse the 13 of you and ask that you return and assemble into your room at 20 minutes to the hour of 4. That's our excuse.